Welcome to A Song of Spice and Rhani, a Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire podcast for the girls, the gays, the theys, and the well-behaved straights. I am your host, Rhani.
And I'm your host, Spicer.
And every week we'll be going through 3 chapters of the A Song of Ice and Fire book series, breaking down what happens, the lore, theories, and our favorite deaths. Are you excited for all the deaths, Spicer?
I wait with anticipation.
Thank you. That was a great, timely joke. Thank you. My father was in high school when that was a timely joke. But really, you really lived in the spirit of it by, dragging it out from then to the present day. Well,
look, if Lady Gaga is dropping as what the Gen Z's now call recession pop, I'm allowed to go back and bring back, Rocky Horror Picture Show. Like,
if millennial media is in with the Gen Z, what's jumping back to Gen X? Like, what's the extra generational jump?
Look, time is irrelevant. Okay, let's talk about fantasy. Let's talk about some dragons.
Yeah. Fantasy. So this week our chapters we had Tyrion II, Jon II, and Daenerys II. Yeah, so lots of stuff. we're
gonna talk a lot about chapter 3.
Yeah. Which, no, it'll be a time. But let's start off with actually no, it's not Tyrion II, it's Tyrion I. What am I talking about? This is our first Tyrion chapter. Very exciting. So let's do a little review of what happens. Tyrion Lannister is at Winterfell still, with everyone reeling in the aftermath of Bran being yeeted out of a window. He wakes up. Actually, he doesn't wake up. He's been reading all night, as apparently he does. Scares the crap out of, I think it's the Septon. He was in the Septon's chambers, reading his books and stuff. He then goes down to the yard, yells at Joffrey a little, as we're all wont to do, and then eventually goes down to breakfast, where he has breakfast with his siblings, Cersei and Jaime, as well as his niece and nephew, Myrcella and Tommen. We exchange some words. Jaime and Cersei are acting very sus. Tyrion notices because he has eyes, and the chapter ends with Jaime wondering aloud which side Tyrion is on, and Tyrion being wounded by that. So yeah, what do we think of our first Tyrion chapter?
Boy George loves food. George loves talking about food. He loves describing food. He loves talking about the way that the texture of food in someone's mouth. I'm not upset. I was very hungry when I was reading this I was reading the chapter on the subway, and I was on my way to get breakfast, and I was damn, now I want bacon. No,
even though it's burnt, even though it's black.
Yeah, that part was okay, we're turning it black. We're turning it black, Tyrion. Okay. I do, which is coming from me. God. Yeah. But wow, George loves food. He loves food. He is giving Tolkien a run for his money on the way that he describes food.
And let me tell you, Spicer, I want you to be prepared. This will be a theme for thousands and thousands of pages. Because George, it is a running joke. And let me tell you, these chapters, which I feel are our first taste of him really leaning into the describing everything about the food, these are his most restrained, I think, because it gets wild. Further down the road, you will have not just paragraphs, but big paragraphs, big, that take up a third of the page, just describing every dish that is at the feast in very specific detail. I need to know what the third side dish was seasoned with, Spicer. I need to know. If I don't know that they use, dragon peppers and fennel, how am I going to live? How am I going to, visually understand this feast, Spicer?
Well, he's just once again representing the fats. That's what's going on here. He's representing his people. He's taking the narrative back. It's a serve.
Serving food.
Serving food. It's literally a serve. He's serving food. Oh
Yes,
god.
no, I agree, and it's. Thank you for picking up on that. I had that written down for the Danny chapter because it also appears a lot there.
It's worse in the Danny chapter. It's worse in
Yeah,
the
oh
Danny
yeah,
chapter.
but no, I'm so glad you picked up on that because it is one of my like favorite like little George isms that pop up everywhere. I'm like, yes, this is what the people needed.
I will say it gives me for Tyrion's chapter, it's more of an insight for me
Mm-hmm.
about Tyrion's character because he's like, I want the bacon burnt, I just want some bread and meat and some beer.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's all I want, right? And
Do you
it's
feel seen?
I feel seen basically is what I'm saying.
Good. Yeah.
Like is Tyrion am I saying that Tyrion is neurodivergent? No, but I'm heavily implying it. Like does he have some like some very specific isms with food? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's like I could just picture like a Jamie and Cersei just like rolling their eyes as he orders it, and they're like, "Oh, not again!" Like, with not with the freak with the burnt bacon again. But aside from the food,
Mm-hmm.
some other things I sort of noticed is because we sort of get more Clegane, pardon me,
Yeah.
the Hound in this
Mm-hmm.
chapter. And once again, like I think I said this to you, I said this last night when we were chatting on the phone, like it's very similar to the show for the most part, like down to
Mm-hmm.
dialogue. I
Yeah.
will say the Hound in the book, and maybe like we're just setting it up and it's gonna go somewhere, is a lot crueler, I feel like, than the Hound in the TV show. Like and maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's just a credit to I can't remember the name of the actor who plays the Hound in the TV show. Um
Rory something. But
yeah,
yeah, go
like,
on.
but maybe that's a credit to like his acting ability that like he was able to add like a layer of sort of softness, like of like underneath
Mm-hmm.
the like rah 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 of it all. But like Clegane reads crueler in the books. Um,
I will agree with that, and I think like it's like you're saying in one respect it is the actor, but in another I do think that they at least in this initial chapter they take out some of his like crueler bits because something that they cut from the show, which in the book the Hound apparently has a bit that he does with Tyrion, which I think is like horrible but also
oh,
kind of
the like
funny.
a voice from nowhere.
Yes, spirits of the air, and he's like looking around because he hears Tyrion talking, and Tyrion's like, "Okay, yeah, he's pretending he can't see me because I'm short, and there's a voice coming. Cool, cool, cool. We've done this 1,000 times, and apparently Joffrey laughs every single time. So like little bits like that, I think like read like add context to like kind of like the cruelty and like the just the general rudeness of the character, and that yeah, no, and I do think just generally in the book he is a little crueler from the get-go, but I also think it like makes his evolution interesting,
Yeah.
because I think the show like teddy bearifies him just a little bit.
He well in the show he reads a lot more like I'm just like a jaded person who has been like
Mm-hmm.
royally fucked multiple times in life, and so
Yeah.
like I just call it as it is, and like in the show he doesn't read as cruel, he just reads as like blunt, right? Like he's like
Yeah.
like because he even kind of in the show like constantly like refers to the fact that like Joffrey is like an asshole, like
Yeah. Yeah.
like he's whereas like he seems a little more buddy buddy with Joffrey in the books.
Yeah.
Though I do love, and like that's my favorite exchange both in the TV show and the book is when like after Tyrion hits the crown prince twice.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Which every time Tyrion hits the crown prince, I'm always laughing. I'm like, yeah, you hit that
Do
little.
it. Do it again.
Do it again.
Give him the chair. Sorry.
Give him the chair. But what's so funny like about that also is like Joffrey. This probably happens all the time. Like Tyrion probably beats the shit out of Joffrey all the time, and Joffrey still doesn't see it coming every time. Like that just
Yeah.
speaks to how dumb he is. Like this.
So dumb.
Like he probably gets smacked in the face at least once a week by his uncle. Like you'd think he'd learn. But then like I do love the exchange between the Hound and Tyrion where the Hound's like the prince will remember that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it as and it's like it's in the book it said like as a warning or something like that. Like it's
Yeah.
just like an interesting insight to the character once again because it's like it's not because like you can tell there's like a little bit of bitterness that like Tyrion kind of dressed the Hound down verbally, and the Hound did not appreciate that. But it's
Mm-hmm.
I think that like, there is some sort of like I'm not sure if it's respect between these two characters, but like it's not all hate between like the Hound and Tyrion. Like there's something going on there of where like the Hound went out of his way to be like that was a dumb move. like
Yeah.
like
No, he had that like moment of honesty,
yeah.
which was like it is interesting because like I don't think that there's like any like necessarily like love between them, but there is like the acknowledgement of reality because they're two characters that are tied just intrinsically to Joffrey because Joffrey is eventually, well, they think eventually one day far in the future will become king, and they're both going to be subjected to the realities of that.
Yeah.
So it feels like that's a moment of like the Hound acknowledging like, hey, like this might be a problem one day, and like we both can't get away from this guy. So yeah, think about that.
Yeah, I think like there's something I'm not sure what it is between them, at least at this point in the book. Like, because I think later it
Mhm.
kind of turns into respect. Or like some I think it's kind of like, especially like when Tyrion like goes on his like, rage quest. Like I think the Hound at the very least is probably like, you do you, girl. Like right. Like
I get it. I get it.
I get it. Like I get it. I have
Yeah.
to kill you now, but I get it.
Mhm.
But no, which like it's just interesting because it's a different flavor of the Hound than we got, and I
Sure.
think a lot of that has to do with the actor. Like he just was very good.
Yeah.
Um. Also, Tommen.
They're like I will say Tom and Marcella are like two little sweethearts. They're just like sweet little kids, and it's very apparent that like Cersei hasn't really paid much attention to these two. She's clearly done all the doting on Joffrey, which is why he's like a complete psychopath. Whereas like these two have kind of been like left to their own devices, so they just act like normal children. They haven't had these like crazy worldviews imposed on them about how much better they are than everyone.
Yeah, because like Joffrey's like making jokes with the Hound of like, oh, I bet hope he dies soon. Because like,
Yeah.
oh, his dog is just so annoying right now and keeping me up all night, and this child that's been paralyzed and is in a coma. Whereas like Tommen's like, I didn't want him to die.
Yeah. And then Jeremy. Ooh, that's a terrible
Jeremy,
ship name for them. Like Cersei and Jamie, Jeremy.
Jeremy,
Horrible. Horrible.
Jeremy.
Horrible. Oh my god.
Our favorite
Um,
problematic couple, our favorite problematic faves, sis.
yeah. But yeah, Jamie and Cersei then that whole time being like, yeah, no, it'd be better if he were dead. I agree with Joffrey that for no other reason than like we just care so deeply.
We just it'd be a mercy, like, and Jamie's like, it'd be a mercy. You know what? Just let me alone with him. Like, I'll just take care of it. Like, it's fine. Like, I'll do the mercy. I'll do the mercy killing. It'll be
Yeah, yeah,
me.
yeah.
It'll be me doing it. Oh my gosh! And it's like I love the whole time that like like Tyrion just figures it out immediately.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you two are connected to this. I don't know if you did it, but you two are
Mm-hmm.
connected to this. Like, you were acting way too sus over breakfast. Like
I also really appreciate Tyrion taking the unfortunately in this world the very brave anti-eugenics stance where when Jamie's
so
like,
brave.
yeah, no, it'd be better if he were dead because he's gonna be a cripple, blah blah blah, and Tyrion's like, well, speaking for the grotesques, I beg to differ. I don't think he would prefer to die. I think he would prefer to live because that doesn't being different, being a quote unquote grotesque, doesn't necessarily mean that I am constantly in search of death. Okay, cool, you weirdos.
Well, and it's like I think like death. Like what's the line? It's like life is like death is dead or something. Like I can't remember. Like it was a very like.
Oh, it's like death is like so final or something.
Yeah, death is like so final or something like that. I'm like, oh, that's like a really good line. Like that's a very good line to
Mhm.
somebody. Next time somebody tells me that, they're not going to vaccinate their child because autism is just so worse, I'm just going to be like, well, death is very final, just
Yeah,
like
just be aware.
just being aware, and also I guess fuck my drag. Like I did love the random like stance against eugenics in this fantasy world, and I went, huh, cool. I just also like he's not Black Beauty. He's not a horse that you have to take out to pasture. Like he's a child. Like what are you talking about?
Not the Black Beauty reference.
Just tell me about the rabbits. Tell me about the rabbits. Tell me about the rabbit brand. No. Just what are you talking about? Like or Old Yeller? Like it's my dog, Mom. I'll take care of it. Like what are you talking about? Oh my god!
It's a child.
It's a child.
Fucking child. You're weirdos. And like obviously, I get like there is the ulterior motive. We're not being like we're not being obtuse to that. But like the argument that's being used to like cover up the fact that there is an ulterior motive is stupid in and of itself.
Well, and that's why like Tyrion's just playing with him because he knows that this argument is like indefensible, right? Like
yes,
which like every time he's like, well, I wouldn't tell that to Lord Stark if I were you. Like, like it's kind of
He'll take you out.
Like, Ned's our favorite cop, polishing his shotgun on the front porch, waiting for him to come home. Like, oh my god. But no, I also I do love the other thing I wanted to say of like the Cersei is also getting a lot of interesting we're getting a lot of insights into her character in this chapter too of like the symbolism of Cersei like being like we're not bringing those beasts with us down south of the wolves. Once again, George subtle as a gun, like because right of like I'm not going to bring these beasts, literal beasts, but also like the Starks who are very different from us in the south and have like a very different moral code.
The wolves don't belong in the south.
Ooh. Yeah, exactly. Ooh. And then like the other thing is like I wrote the irony of Cersei being concerned about Tyrion's language when she is literally fucking her brother. Cersei is a Republican. Like she and Marjorie Taylor Greene would be like besties in Congress together. Like they'd be best friends. Like making transphobic slurs in the middle of a goddamn hearing. Like that is it is fascinating, this woman, because like and I'm like literally that's when it snapped into place. Like she's a Republican, like she is like weirdly conservative about like don't say swear words around my kid, Tyrion, like don't talk about sex around my kids, I'm gonna think of the children, but also I'm literally going to fuck my brother. Like
it's the hypocrisy and like the secret, like not only is this like secret deviant behavior, it's like as far down that path as you can go, but in public like we're upstanding. I don't know what you're talking about. How dare you insinuate anything to the contrary?
Well, and it's also like they're not even being like, because like I know in the TV show they talk about, so I don't know if this is like a thing that's in the book of where like when like Ned Stark confronts her in the TV show in that infamous scene that when you play the game you either win or die, and then like there's that scene where he like confronts her about that, about like incest, and she kind of shrugs it off. She's like, well, the Targaryens used to do incest all the time, and it's like, which like I know there's like Targaryen hate, but it's like, you mean the tyrannical rulers who burned
that you needed to overthrow?
That you needed to overthrow
those people?
Those people, the people that like literally tried to kill your family, like those people, like those are the ones that you're using to justify your deviant behavior. Like, no,
you just don't understand, Spicer. You just don't understand. If I just act well in public, that's all that matters. What I actually do doesn't matter at all. Okay.
Like she would give a blowjob during a Beetlejuice performance. Like that is what I'm saying. Like that is what would happen with Sirius.
Okay.
Anyways, Cersei Lannister is a Republican. She is the new Secretary of Press for the president, and yeah, that's all I got to say on that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. One just shifting gears ever so slightly. One thing that I did want to bring up that I thought was really funny is, since this is our first like Tyrion POV, we get like insight into like kind of the struggles that he has with like moving. Like it's hard for him to like walk around and stuff. But this is the first reappearance of him since his acrobatic mastery of backflips and everything until like 3 chapters ago. Like what?
Just wait, what's the name of Spider-Man again in the comics? What's his name?
Spider-Man?
No, his actual name. His like
Peter Parker.
Yeah, it's so Tyrion Parker. Tyrion Parker. Like, it's just God. Which, once again, like, because in this chapter I clocked that immediately, and I'm like, oh, this is actually like a really good portrayal of what it is to have dwarfism, right? Like, I that there's like mobility issues, and like, this is like affecting the way that he like is able to function in the world. But he leapt onto a wall, George.
Yeah. From the second story, he does a backflip and lands perfectly. Tens across the board. But then 2 chapters later, like, oh, it's hard. Stairs are hard because there's a physical disability here. George, you're a funny man.
You know what it's giving, and this is I don't know, because I don't know if this is true, but like, this is my suspicion, is that I think. When like you work on a project, or like a writer works on a project, and it's very clear which parts they wrote were like their initial sketches, right? And like they wrote like chronologically, they wrote first, and then they kind of like, after they like refined it a little bit, and they kind of forgot to like go back in and edit and be like, oh wait, this person actually has a disability. Like, that's what it reads. I feel like that chapter was probably written like first as like a little like little snippet of something, and he's like, this might be something, and then later he's like, oh, this is something, and like after he had refined the story and then like went back and actually started writing, he just forgot to take out the part where he's a circus performer. Just
big oof. Yeah, no, this feels early in the process, and then he came back, and then like, like he didn't write like a Tyrion chapter for a while, and so like when he came back and started doing that, it was something a little different. No, I agree. Okay, well, is there anything else before we go on break?
No, I that was it. That was all I had on that chapter. Fun time.
Okay, cool. Then we will take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay. And we're back. So up next we have Jon II. So for a quick summary, Jon is preparing to leave for the Night's Watch with Benjen. It has been a fortnight since Bran has fallen, and basically everyone has waited as long as they could. So Jon goes to Bran's room, where Lady Catelyn has been for the past fortnight. She is very unwell. She has not slept. She has not eaten. Bran is also very unwell, and there is a bit of a confrontation where Jon wants to say goodbye, and Catelyn, let's just say this is the meanest she ever is. Before eventually she tells Jon that it should have been you. Jon is very sad. He goes outside. He also says bye to Robb, and then he goes and says bye to Arya, where he gives Arya her sword, needle, and then he gives her a hug, and they leave. So there you go. What are we thinking? This was a shorter chapter, but
doozy,
interesting.
A doozy nonetheless.
But a doozy nonetheless. Absolutely.
I will say, my first thing I'll say is, Uncle Benji has the car running, Jon. He's got the Toyota is running. It is on. He is ready to go.
Yeah.
I love
honking the horn. Like, Jon, get in.
Like, we got to go do border security.
We were supposed to be on the road 2 hours ago. We're not gonna get to the hotel in time.
I have us pre-checked into the Best Western. Damn it! Like,
yeah, no, there is certainly that like level of urgency throughout, which makes like each of these goodbyes like kind of sad, because it really is like truly last minute. and makes each of them, uniquely sad because, oof, that Catelyn scene. This is, I will say, this is a scene where everyone who doesn't like her loves to point at it and be like, look at this monster, abusing this child. And I'm like, okay.
I will say it's like I wrote, damn, Catelyn, I defended you. And it's like I get where the hate comes from. I still think the hate is sexist. Like the hate is clearly sexist, and like you just like your boy Jon Snow because you like what's his face in the TV show, and all of you are dealing with internalized homophobia. And it manifests in this way.
Misogyny? Do you
Yeah,
mean?
but yeah. Well, no, because they all want to fuck him. So.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. Because we all do. Like,
yeah, I mean,
no lies detected there. But like I will say, like, I get reading this chapter, I'm like, oh, she feels very cold. What I will say in defense of her, or rather, I think this is just good writing on the part of George. As somebody who has witnessed their own mother in the throes of grief, sitting next to their loved one in a hospital, and having had to peel my mother away and telling her, you've been here for days now.
Yeah.
Please go take a shower. Like, right. Like,
yeah.
It feels very real because like when and like added doubly so, like the line where it says like, it seems like she aged years. I'm like, yep. Cause like personal insight, like my mother, and my father both had cancer around the same time. His went into remission and she had to get a double mastectomy. And like, so was in surgery, like, and literally after she came out of surgery and was recovering, my father then relapsed into his cancer, had a stroke, and then like she literally just had surgery. Like, and then she was like sitting by his bed when she should have been recovering, and we had to like peel her away and be like, Mom, you have to go take a shower now. Like you need to go eat food. Like you need to go. It's like, so that read very real to me of like, no, like when you're a mom and especially your child is on the verge of death, like, yeah, that makes sense to me. You're in a very raw, vulnerable place. So it makes sense that like all of these feelings that she already has and is very open about, they're doubly raw right now. Yes. And like I would argue she doesn't not have a heart because she doesn't call the guards on Jon.
Yeah.
Like, and that's even acknowledged in the text of where Jon's like, well, I guess she doesn't totally hate me because she didn't, have the guards come throw me out. But like the line, it should have been you. Oof. Like,
oof. And no, going off of everything that you've said, I agree that like this is her at like her most unlikable, but also I think the thing that gets lost a lot when people talk about this and be like, this is like one of the big reasons I hate her. It's like people forget the context of it all. Like she has been sleep deprived for days. She has not, she has not eaten. She is like literally out of her mind. There isn't like, she is not in full possession of her cognitive abilities right now. And so in that state, does she say like a truly like reprehensible thing to Jon that he absolutely does not deserve? Absolutely. I am not going to argue and be like, yeah, it should have been you, Jon Snow. Like, no, I'm not like defending that statement at all. But like, if you look at like how it exists in the context, like I get how she gets there, because something that like we do know, from the text is that at most she has been like neglectful of Jon. Not that she has any responsibility to him. He's not her kid. But like for all of his life, she has basically just ignored him for like the most part. She's never been like the cruel stepmother who like, throws insults at him every day. She just doesn't talk to him. The most she's ever done like before this is shoot him a dirty look. So it like does it make sense that like in this moment where she's like fully lost her faculties, she like says something like truly reprehensible in the throes of her grief? I think it makes perfect sense, and also is a very humanizing thing. Like you mentioned, like this feels very true to reality of someone who is in that situation, and that's just kind of the ugliness of reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, like when you're dealing with grief like that, like
Mm-hmm.
you are not your best person at all. Like,
No.
like she is like, and so once again, like these deep seated feelings she already has that she has been unable to work through are going to manifest themselves. And once again, like I just think that's good writing on the part of George, like good character writing, because it shows like she is a human being. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
a thing that human beings do when they're hurt. Hurt
Yeah.
people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like I once again, like I now understand better where all the hate comes from. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's justified. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like
Well, it's because people are like latching on to one thing and ignoring everything around it. It's so that's why like I feel it's like disingenuous, because I feel like other characters throughout the series will do things that are bad and it doesn't impact people's feelings on them. Like Tyrion, as things go on, will do horrific things, and people usually didn't start like really disliking him until like way after he did a bunch of the bad things. And it's not until he gets to the really really bad things that some people, and only some people, start to go like, I don't know about him. But like there are lots of characters who are doing like morally questionable things, I think a lot of the time for less not justified but like less understandable reasons, and people don't struggle with that, but they do with her, because like with her all they can remember is like, oh, she was so cruel to this boy who didn't deserve it. And like, yes, but again, she didn't, John didn't fall out of a coconut tree. He exists in the fucking context of it all. So just, I don't know, like, stop. Think. I don't know. People think. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. Like, it's weird.
it's almost as if some people already don't like women, and the minute they are presented with a reason to not actually like a woman or a woman character, they then latch onto it because of their own internalized misogyny towards women. Like, it's almost as if we're willing to ignore traits in male characters that are morally questionable because they're a dude. Like,
Yeah. That's my bro, Spicer. How dare you? How dare you? My bro was going through it. Okay, dude,
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 dude.
dude. Viserys is just really sad because he had a bad childhood. He had a
Yeah.
really bad childhood. Oh my god! But Catelyn, she's just a bitch. She's just a stone cold evil bitch.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! But on a more positive note,
Uh-huh.
love
Let's turn it
Pink,
around.
love Pink, love Pink.
Love Pink.
No, I love John and Arya's relationship. I think it's
Yeah.
just the two chapters we've seen them together. I'm like, oh, that's like such a fun, like, big bro, little sister sort of relationship. It especially sort of like, it's because they're both outsiders. Because like they
Yeah.
both recognize, once again, my queer reading of this text, of where like they both recognize that like in different ways they are outcasts in this community, in this society, in this family even. And because like
Mhm.
she doesn't adhere to gender norms and he is a bastard. And so the way that they sort of like in the very little interaction that we get from them, like you can tell they have a really long history. Like they are the
Yeah.
siblings who like stayed up till midnight one night just like talking, right? Like, and like they would sneak out together, and like he's like the cool bro that would like give her like a sip of his beer or whatever, right? Like, like, right, like it's very
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
that. It's very much that, like, and they sort of like, because they both see each other in sort of the way, and like I love that once again, like John, our queer ally, because he's like, here's a sword, small child. Sword.
Okay, I just need to say on that, because this is the one big note I wrote down for this chapter. Okay, John regardless of like parentage with Jon, because I know that'll be, like a question for further down the road. But regardless of all that, Jon is Ned Stark's son, giving a 9-year-old a dangerous weapon that they do not have any right to be having. Like, oh, we have these wild animals that will grow into giant beasts that can rip a man's hand off. Ooh, well, as long as the kids, act responsibly, they can take care of theirs.
Yeah, pick up the poop and you can have these wild animals.
And here's Jon being like, well, if you practice the violin, I guess we can get you one, except it's a sword. Except it's a fucking sword to a 9-year-old. She's 9. She's a third grader. She's a fucking third grader. Like, what?
And it is like it's a very touching moment, but then I did have that moment of like, this is a 9-year-old. Like, this is a small child which Jon is such a 14-year-old little shit in this chapter. Cause like, once again, Uncle Benji's out in the car honking the horn, like, get going. He's like, in a minute. And then he's like, say goodbye. Cause I didn't do that the days leading
before.
Yeah. The literal days leading up to this. But like, it's just so funny to me that like, once again, he's giving this like 9-year-old a sword, and it's like, oh my god, god damn it, you want to be the cool brother so bad. Here's a weapon, small child. Have fun. Make sure you practice. You'll need to practice. And I also love he's like, oh, it's which like the way that it's being described is very much like a rapier. Like he's like, oh yeah, this isn't a broadsword. I'm like, it's a rapier though. You can still, and he even says like, you could poke a hole in a man. It's like, yeah, have you ever held a rapier before? It's a weapon that can kill you.
Yeah. But it's okay because she's going to practice. It's okay because she's responsible. Stark kids, you have to understand, Spicer. They're built different. Okay, they're built different. They can just have a wild animal. They can just have a sword. Yeah, they're in the 3rd grade, but you know what? Like, they're not like the other kids. Okay, it's fine.
Man, you must be swift as course. I can't wait for the training montage of Arya Stark.
That's what was honestly missing from the TV show. We needed more training montages of Arya Stark with Needle just like in the woods somewhere.
Yeah. And it's like the Rocky theme, like playing in the background. And she's like running up the steps of King's Landing and like randomly in like a jogger, like
mm-hmm.
Oh my god. But yeah, no, that damn Jon, let's give the child a weapon, sure, fine, whatever. But it is like a lovely moment for their character. Like, if you compartmentalize the fact that this child was just handed a weapon, it's like a lovely moment of like, he's the only one, like, once again, my queer reading of Arya Stark, like it's he's like the ally because he's the only one that's like actually listening to like what she wants to do, like especially considering like the chapter that set this up earlier where like they're watching the people do the sword fighting and she's like, I wish I could. And also just like the symbolism of like, hey, here's this like symbol of masculinity that I'm giving to you now. Don't tell anyone about it. This is our little secret. Like, but you need to work on it. Like, right. I'm like, okay. Subtle as a gun, George. Like,
no, it's good. It's a very sweet dynamic between the two of them. I like fully agree. He's the sibling that understands, and that's like always like a sweet thing to read. And I hope you've enjoyed it while it lasted, because this is it.
Oh, really?
We're done. Oh yeah. They're gone.
I guess yeah, because Arya like eventually like goes off to King's Landing and then goes to learn to be a ninja, and Jon's fighting ice zombies.
Yep. So yeah, no, this was really sweet. Thank you, George, and thank you for not giving it to us again. Hopefully one day in the future we get to read about them together. But,
well, don't you forget, because remember, in the battle that lasts one night in the future, they have a fun little moment where they just say, fuck you, got mine, to everyone else.
I'm tired, Spicer. Why are you doing this evil?
It was nominated for an Emmy. It was nominated for an Emmy.
I know it was. I know. Yep. Yeah, it was. And that shows you how quality is always top of mind for most of these award shows. Okay, on that terrible, horrible, just bad juju of a moment, let's go on break.
Let's take a break.
Okay, and we are back. So we have arrived at Daenerys II, the chapter that I have been dreading since the beginning of this podcast, which is rough because there are, I think, some really interesting and cool elements to it, as well as some that are a bit of a struggle. So let's do a quick summary before we dive in. Daenerys 2 revolves around the wedding of Daenerys to Khal Drogo. It is a big outdoor affair. We have exchanging of gifts. We have Dothraki men doing it in front of her with people and then killing each other. Dany is terrified through it all. I think right before we get to the wedding, she has a dragon dream, which will be interesting and I want to talk about. And then it ends with basically her getting the gift of her silver mare, riding out with Khal Drogo, and the ending right as they are about to consummate the marriage. Yeah. So real quick, I just want to say, obviously, this is some very touchy subject matter here. So I would like to start by just, not ignoring the elephant in the room. So due to the touchy subject matter, I would like to talk about the end of the chapter first so that we can obviously, examine that, how we feel it's executed, and then we will go talk about the a lot of the Easter eggs that we get at the beginning of the chapter, which I do think merit some discussion, are very interesting in themselves. So let's just start off right off the bat. This is rough. This is rough to read because we're doing like the lead up to the consummation of a marriage between a grown ass adult and a 13-year-old girl. It is icky. And I think this is another example of what I talked about a few weeks ago, where there's like intent versus execution, where I think we have enough clues in here to understand like the intent of this. Like, it's meant to be bad, language that's used earlier in the text. Daenerys, like in her point of view, refers to her being sold. She is sold to Khal Drogo. That implies this isn't a good thing, But then in the execution of it, I think it's rough because there are two like conflicting things that are like fighting against the idea that like, child marriage is bad, which I do think ultimately George is trying to say. But I think George is trying to make it not violent. I think there's an attempt to like make it so that like Daenerys isn't, I guess you could say, like scarred by the event. And so there is like the almost the miming of consent, where he like Khal Drogo like waits for Dany to be like, okay, I'm cool to do this now. And so I get like George is trying to avoid like, okay, she's young, let's avoid it being like it's violent and she's young. And yeah, so I think that is fighting against the characterization of this being like a bad like child marriage, though. So yeah, you jump in. I'm starting to get a little scattered here.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely like everything you said, and I clocked that like weird half consent thing of like we have like thing of like the only word he knows is no, and then eventually she says yes, and then we cut to black. Which once again, like I kind of was like, okay, well, it's nice that we have like the miming of consent here. It's still a child.
And yeah, so there is no consent. Like there's no universe where there can be consent.
Yeah, because she's literally, and even in the universe, like once again, like we've talked about how like George goes out of the way to like let us know, like even in this universe, even in this time period, like this is weird, this is wrong, like this is not a good thing. She has been sold so that her brother can get him an army, which that is dubious at best. Even right now, like. Yeah. We all know that's not going to happen. Like, and, but like, it is weird and icky. I also will say, like, I wrote the nipple fixation is back.
Yeah.
Whole paragraph
Oh,
on it.
that was the other thing. Sorry, when I said two things earlier, the like George trying to make it not violent is undercutting the message, and then the other thing is the way that he is describing things.
Yeah,
Like
it's clearly very violent. It's
yeah,
like
it's like there's a violence in the violation of this child, and like the way that it's being written about has this like weird voyeuristic tinge to it, because that's unfortunately just how George like writes sex. So then having to write like this scene which, like, you know, requires, I think if you are going to do anything in this realm, requires like the deftest of hands, which he doesn't have in this category. Like anytime he writes sex, I don't think it's great. And so when it's like sex that requires a deft hand because like this is touchy and icky and gross, like he just kind of fails on both counts.
Yeah. Well, and it's like I also, the other thing that's sort of going on here, and like I have 2 points to make, but I want to say this beforehand. I think like another thing that's making this super icky that I'm not sure is something that has been talked about yet is like we have like mythical Orientalism going on here, right? Like where the Dothraki are so like you know, like there's a whole line like they don't understand sin and shame like we do, right? And it's like very Orientalist and like of like the, you know, the people from the far side of the planet that have like weird backwoods morals, and they have sex in public and they kill each other over their conquests and like blah 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 blah, blah, right? Like it's a little icky. It's giving like a French novelist in like 1889. Like it's just George, and so I think that's also like tinging this and making this even ickier, that like we're already talking about a child bride, and we're also, and like I know this is a mythical culture, but like it is very clearly influenced by real world cultures. Like it is very clear the cultures we are referencing. Like I made the joke like earlier, like, you know, Genghis Khan over here. Like it's very clear we're referencing like Mongol culture, and we're referencing like Caucasus, the culture of the Caucasus, right? Like it's very clear like the peoples that we are referencing here. And these are like real stereotypes that were made by Europeans about this culture, right? Like this thing does not, this also does not exist like outside of like a vacuum. And like this exists in context of like George is pulling from real world historical viewpoints of other cultures, but he's painting it as like the truth, which is an extra layer of like ickiness that makes all this bad. Because now not only are we getting this level of like, this is icky because this is a child, it's like it's the Orientalist brute, right? It's that trope of you know, the white slave, for lack of a better word, right? Like that trope that we have in media. So like I think that's also making it a little icky for everyone, and that was another thing I clocked, like especially in like remembering like the TV show too. I'm like, oh wow, this is just straight up Orientalist. Like this is yikes. Which is like always a problem in like fantasy, because like there's that whole debate of like, okay, well you can't just make fantasy a bunch of white people because that's like icky in its own way. But then, like, when white people try to write about, like, other made-up mythical cultures that are based on real-world cultures, the real world leaks in, and then it becomes racist anyway. So, like, and I'm not trying to say, like, George is a racist. No, I'm not trying to say that. I'm saying, like, we are seeing some biases leak into writing, and, you know, I don't know if he was aware of this, or, like, maybe he was, and he was trying to play with it. But it's, like, the problem is, like, this is, like, being painted as the truth, right? That, like, because we see them having sex, right? Like, it is painted in vivid detail. But the two things I kind of wanted to discuss is like, or like throw into the pot, is like I've been thinking a lot about like, you know, Greek theater. And for those of us who like don't know about ancient Greek theater, didn't study it forever, you know, a lot of our ideas of like genre like come from Greek theater, because like there were different types of plays they would do depending on like what part of the festival of Dionysus they were being performed at. And like you had your tragedies, which were like at the beginning of the day, and you had like your comedies at the end of the day, which were like like your satyr plays, which were, just like sex comedies. But then at the beginning of the day, you had your tragedies, usually like a trilogy, which is where we get the concept of a trilogy from. And the Greeks were very careful, unlike the Romans, about what they put in their plays. Like they were very careful. And that had to also do with like the fact that like Greek culture was a lot more like obsessed with like virtue and like a lot more probably what we would describe as like puritanical even than like the Romans were. And like they talked about violence and they talked about sex, just look at their faces. But like the way that they talked about it was very careful. And like they would talk about like touchy subjects. I mean, Oedipus like married his mom. Like, right, like yeah. Right, like they would talk about touchy subjects, but they would be very careful. And like there were a lot of self-imposed rules. Like both the authors would just follow it because like that's what was expected in like Greek tragedy. Like you wouldn't do these things, and also just like societal rules of like you can't write about this. And like plays were always also expected to like have some sort of like moral bent. But like, and I'm not trying to say that like we need to be like the Greeks, because basically what happened is like they never showed violence on stage. Like that was just like a big no-no. You never showed violence on stage. So usually what would happen is like, the climax of the play would be reached, and then like the person who's about to like get killed or maimed or whatever, they'd like run off stage, and then like a minor character would run on stage and deliver some big monologue and be like, oh my God, they got killed and blah, 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 this and happened. And then they'd like literally roll out the dead body in like a thing that translated to like the death wagon. And like, they'd be like, ah, look at that. And the audience would be like, gasp. And then like the show ended. And like, I'm not trying to say that we need to go back to the Greeks. I'm not trying to say that at all. Because like I actually think there's like a bent of conservatism right now in media that is concerning. I also think there's another bent in media right now, which is just like we talked about earlier, the sort of Stephen King of it all, of just like what boundaries can we push just to push the boundaries. Yeah. Like I think there's something to be said about sort of having self-imposed boundaries, because like it sort of forces you to like rethink how you're going to tell this story, like as a storyteller, and it forces and also like I think it just sometimes strengthens the story, frankly, like because it forces you to like think, well, how am I going to do this? Because another example I want to give is so I like my favorite writer is Stephen Sondheim, and for those of us who don't know, he's a composer lyricist, and probably his biggest show is Sweeney Todd, which about a guy who gets accused of a false crime and his daughter is taken by a creepy judge. And in the course of the play, the creepy judge is like, I'm gonna marry that girl, and like it is very much framed as like gross, you endanger girl. And the way that, and there's a very infamous story of where there was a song in the show where the judge is singing about how he's lusting after this girl, and he's like doing a mea culpa, and then he's basically self-flogging during the show because he's got that Catholic guilt. And the song ends with "Forgive me for being gross" with him climaxing. And then he's like, I'm gonna marry that girl. Sondheim and Hal Prince wisely cut the song from the show. And I used to be very much the opposite of like, oh, it's like a great song and like it's so edgy and whatever. And it's like now I've seen the show a few times, and I saw the recent production on Broadway, and I kind of am now like, no, the story is stronger for it, because like we don't need to see that. That's kind of gross. Like it's like we get this character, because like once again in a very similar way with like Dany and Khal Drogo, like it's meant to be like, this is gross, this is icky, like danger. And like the way that's done in the show now is like it's literally a couple of lines, and it's like very clear in the writing of like there's like this one line where like the judge like barks at Joanna and is like, come Joanna, right? And like the way that the guy who played it in the Broadway production, like he just like the way he says it is so like icky, and he like extends his hand, and then like the actress like gives this look of like, oh no, I'm gonna get molested, right? Like, and we get the idea immediately, right? Like we know this girl is in danger. And like, I think it makes the story stronger because like, we don't have to have it spelled out for us. Like, we know what's about to happen here. Like, we are aware. And so like, I think that is like an example of you don't need to spell it out for us, especially these things. Like the more touchy you get in like the ickiness of the subject matter you're talking about, the more, as you said, the more deft you have to be in how you portray it. And I think like that's like a good example of like, once again, child bride and some solid like consensual issues. but like I think the way that like Hugh Wheeler, the book writer, and then like Sondheim like do it in the show, and like they ultimately decided to cut the song because they're like, this, we don't need this. Like it's too on the nose. And it's funny because like Sondheim even said in a similar way that like the Stephen King of it all, he's like, I wanted to be the first person on Broadway to like have an orgasm on stage. Like,
Mhm.
and he's like, but then he realized like, but it doesn't need it. Like that's an
Yeah.
icky. It hurts the storytelling. And once again, like I am not trying to sit here and say like I am a better writer than George R. Martin. Like the stats speak for themselves. But like, this is an issue of where I think like the storytelling is hurt
Yeah.
because it was not handled in the deftest way possible. And it's I think the story is hurt. Like I like that's because it's like I don't think I gained anything from that, right? Like and I'm not trying to say like he should have cut the black earlier. Like I'm not trying to like be like prescriptive and like what I think should and should not have happened. I'm just saying it's not this. Like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
because I now understand why people like have such a hard time getting through the book because like this is only in the first like 100 something pages, like
Mhm.
and we're already seeing some essay happening to
Yeah.
a child, and that's icky. So yeah, that is those are my thoughts on that section.
No, you. Thank you. And thank you for bringing the Sweeney Todd example. I think that is a very good example of where, like, restraint could not just restraint, but like an awareness of like how things could affect the overall structure of the story is good and helpful in the editing process. And I do agree. Something that I did want to expand upon just a little bit, since we reference it, but it's a reference to a conversation that only the two of us had. When we keep saying like the Stephen King of it all, in prepping Spicer for this chapter, something I brought up, which I've thought about when like pondering just like the choices George made at the end of this chapter, is I do think it was like a very weird trend in the 90s, where like I would say like 80s and 90s, where a lot of like authors were doing like weird, edgy stuff concerning sex and then involving children. The other big example of it being Stephen King, especially like It. There is like the infamous, like horrible group sex scene in it, and it's weird, and he has since come out and said like, hey, I really like regret this, I wish I hadn't included it at the time. It like made sense in what I was trying to do, and like
In my coke fueled
whatever.
fantasies, like it made
Yeah,
sense to me.
the cocaine just made it so like, no, it like made sense, I just don't know what to tell you. But like it was like a weird trend at the time, and I don't like, I'm very grateful that it has died out seemingly, but this is like, that is one aspect of the book that I feel like dates it to a very like particular era, unfortunately so. And I will say, like, going forward, while like there will still be like an occasionally like problematic sex scene, I think for the most part they normally make sense within the context of the story without being so icky that it's like almost unreadable. And even this one, like, again, it is the lead up to a sex scene and then it cuts to black. We don't actually see any, actual whatever. It's just like some like foreplay and then cut to black. It's which is still wildly icky enough. I'm not saying it isn't, but yeah, I will say for the most part, I do think this is like the hardest thing. And if you make it past this, great. I think you're probably solid for the rest of the series. There's maybe like one more like pretty icky scene, and that's like in book 5, but in the context of that, whatever, I like, it's really gross and I wish it didn't happen, but it like, I am more angry at the character than I am at the writer on that one anyway.
And I think like another thing to sort of mention is because like I don't want this to come off that like we're too like conservative, like Puritans who are like rah rah rah, no sex in books. Like I think the difference here is like how this, like it's like the context of like, once again, this is a child. Like,
Yeah,
this is a child that we are talking about here. She is underage, she cannot consent. Like, that is why that is wrong. She can't consent to this. But the other thing that I think that is worth mentioning is like why this is being used and how this is being used. Of like
Mhm.
compared to like, like I was talking with Rhani last night and I was like making a joke about like, the romantasy like genre nowadays where like, fairies be clapping cheeks all the time. Like, and like, while I have thoughts and feelings on that too, like I think difference of why like, not just that, but like it's how you are using sexuality in your story, like because in this it's sort of for like a shock or a horror value of like sort of like a body horror of like the idea of like losing autonomy over your body, right? Like that it is meant to scare you, it is meant to shock you, and you're dealing with something that is like so intrinsically personal and like close to the human experience, like sexuality, um as opposed to like a book or a piece of media that's using it to like empower, right? Because like I think like especially with the romantasy sort of genre, it's a lot of like women authors, and like that is an important context to consider where it's like it's a lot of
Mhm.
women sort of like reclaiming their body, right? Like that's what's going on, right? It's
Mhm.
women's and the people like reclaiming their body, reclaiming their autonomy, and it's sort of the opposite, right? Where it's like, no, I'm in control of my body here, and like I am choosing to do this because this is pleasurable, as
Mhm.
opposed to this where the whole point is that
Yeah.
it is I am literally taking power away from this character, and like I am making them like lose their autonomy, and that is also icky because once again
Yeah.
this is a child. So I think it's
Mhm.
not just the fact that like we're like rah rah rah, how dare that deviant George R. Martin like bring sexuality into our pure fantasy genre. It's like no, it's the context in which this sexuality works. Because like we made jokes about Ned Stark getting it in the last episode, but like that's fine because like ultimately like that's actually like a sweet moment between those characters, right? Like that's an expression of
Mhm.
their like love, and like I think that's great. I think that's fine. It's a little cringy the way that sometimes Uncle George writes it. But
Uh-huh.
like it's sweet. It's ultimately sweet. Whereas this, it's like it's the horror shock value of, and that's why
Yeah.
it's very Stephen King of like body horror. Danny no longer has autonomy or control over her body, and it's like those authors were like, because a lot of the like horror genre and like fantasy genre were like trying to push the boundaries on things, and they were sort of running out of you know frontiers to explore, and I think they kind of like looked around and like, well, we haven't talked about kids losing their autonomy, so let's go there. And it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't have gone there. What if we
Yeah.
didn't?
No, I agree. And with that, let's talk about the beginning of this
Yeah.
chapter a little bit, just to like kind of wrap up on a lighter note. Because there are like a lot of fun tidbits and details in this chapter. The first one that I want to bring up because I just love it is Viserys just being in a pissy mood the
So
entire
pissy,
time.
so mad because it's not his special day, even though it's not his
Uh-huh.
wedding, and he is so mad that he has to sit still in a place of honor, but just
Uh-huh.
not at the head of the table. He's like, mur, 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 I'm the king.
And the fact that like Daenerys and Khal Drogo are being like offered the food first, and then he gets like the leftovers that they haven't taken, and he's like, and it's like described as like the day is wearing on, his attitude and mood are getting worse and worse because he's just being insulted over and over again. I'm like,
Which also
yes,
once again the food, just him talking about the
once
food.
again the food,
Once again the food.
George's obsession. It's wild. It is so. As I was reading, I'm like, we're back, baby. We are back.
We're so
I'm
bad.
reading it all over again.
I will say it's like you can tell where George like needed a sandwich in his writing. It's like someone get that man a sandwich because he was hungry. He was
I
hungry.
love I love that idea. Like every time we get one of these paragraphs, it's like 2 o'clock. It's like 2 o'clock. He hasn't had lunch yet, and he like this is the last thing he wrote. He's like, "Fine, I'm gonna go eat. I need to go. Oh, sorry."
Sorry, I just wrote 5 paragraphs about this pudding. Like I need to go eat a sandwich now. I
Oh, it's
I
so
will
good.
I will also say like on the Viserys note, like it's I also love how like during all of that, like once again, Illyrio, the biggest clown in the world, just toying
Uh
with
huh.
this kid, and then like Mormont realizing, did I just ally myself with an idiot? Like, Like
Yeah.
Mormont like slowly realizing like, oh, this kid's an idiot. Like
Yeah.
and then him being like, I want to stick with Danny more. She seems like she's got a good head. And then my other favorite line is once again we get like Danny's like internal thoughts where she is just like, my brother's an idiot. Because like Viserys like talks about like the dragon will do this, the dragon will do that. And then Danny, like her line of there are no more dragons. Like
Uh-huh. I love her like internal commentary on shit. It's always like so exacting, and it's always like a read, but it's a very like subtle one. Where it's not like her in her head like screaming like, you fucking moron, you're such an idiot, big bro, blah blah blah. No, it's always like, I am the dragon. There aren't any dragons.
what dragon are you talking about?
Yeah.
Literally, we got
um
stillborn dragon eggs, and like that's all there is.
uh-huh. And then speaking of, as we need to, as we should point out, because this is a big difference from the TV show, and it pisses me off to no end. Dragon dreams. We get a dragon dream here, which are important to Targaryens and like Valyrians in general. So Daenerys has her first dragon dream. These are prophetic dreams that affect certain Targaryens throughout history, and it's important because it seems that all of them are trying to communicate aspects of the future, and sometimes Targaryens like misinterpret them and try to like force them to happen because they think that they are fulfilling a prophecy or something, and that typically ends poorly, ends very poorly. But Daenerys just kind of takes it in here, and some interesting tidbits about it that I want to mention, because again, the TV show cuts it because we can't have magic, because fuck that. Well, it's not necessary. I'm sure it won't cause issues down the road. But in the Dragon Dreams, we get Viserys hitting her, which like she's upset about. We then have her seemingly losing a child. It's described like her thighs are like slick with like blood, and then it's followed by a dragon, like a literal big giant dragon, in the middle of this like flaming pyre, which I'm sure won't, come into the story at any point. Not important.
It's very much giving Cassandra, which letting you in on Rhani and Spicer lore. I always refer to Rhani as Cassandra because Rhani foresees the future. Like Rhani's like, this thing's gonna happen. I'm like, no, it's not. And it's very Cassandra from Greek mythology of like nobody believes what she's saying, but it's very much giving Cassandra of where like the Targaryens and specifically Dany are like having these visions and they're like, I don't know what this means. Like
Yeah, no,
that was a
and
very specific dream. Like
yes, it was a very specific dream, and I really I like it, and I think it's important to like the context of the story, because there are like weird things happening. Like everyone always likes to talk about like the realism of this world, but they're like there is like weird magic shit, and I do think it's important. I do think it has meaning. I don't think George is including it just to like fake us out. So like a moment like this where you are being sent the information, and then later we'll learn like other people, other Targaryens have also gotten these dragon dreams, and it doesn't normally go well for them. They either misinterpret it or it goes wrong. And like the one person who it goes right for is Daenerys, because she doesn't, really try to like fuck with it in any way, until like she's just doing what feels right in the moment. So anyway, I think it'll be important for later. I wanted to talk about that because once again the show cut it because they suck. Let me see.
this is the good season of the show too. Like that's
Oh yeah, no. It's okay. Like, and see, this is the issue, because like the first book, and even I'll say like the second book, even for the most part, are pretty good adaptations, but like where we like see the seeds of an issue are like the few things that they do cut. I do typically think are like, oh, this might be important for later. Oh, this is like an important framing device, and so losing it fundamentally alters the framing of the story. And so like it losing something like this, I feel like takes like the destiny out of it all. And I do think that there there is that aspect of the story in some regards, and like how destiny plays out we don't know, but like there are like large forces converging, and it's not just all like the hubris of man going too far, like and so like I think later on when the show tries to turn certain characters crazy, it feels like they've led us down that path, when in actuality, like, no, these characters, like, there are big forces. It's not just that they were always like that they always had like an issue with their hubris, if that makes sense. Sorry.
Well, it's like the show was much more interested in what, not to bring Greek theater into it again, but sort of, but the hubris, right? Like they were much more interested in like, but what's also funny is like people forget that Greek mythology also, like, part of it was like man versus God, right? Like man versus nature. Like you can't control the gods, you can't control nature. Like, and sometimes the gods are just petty and random and vindictive, and like that's, you know, and then you add that with hubris, you add that with human beings who are unpredictable as well, and then like tragedy ensues. And so I think like the show was much more interested, like, once again, in the realism bent of it all, but like they are forgetting that like George is talking about how like sometimes there's just like existential shit going on. Sometimes like sometimes you have ice zombies, like, and you can't reason or control the ice zombies. There's no alliance to be made, and like the show just seems so disinterested in that, which is kind of why like that plot line like piddled out in the end, because like that's not what they were interested in. Like they were interested in their political thriller, and it's like, well, that's not what George was talking about. Like George was talking was like talking about how like politics enters into all that, but like which is also ultimately like why I think George's perspective is so interesting, because like he's talking about how the intersection of like politics with the world, right? And how like the world doesn't care about your economic policies, Republican Party, like global warming's still happening. Like the largest iceberg in history just broke off from Antarctica and is now threatening islands off of the coast of South America because it's going to slam into them. Like it doesn't matter what your policies are, it's still gonna happen. So what are you gonna do about it? Like that's ultimately what George is talking about in these books. Like it doesn't matter who sits on the Iron Throne, you dumb bitches. The ice zombies are still coming. Do you have the dragons ready? I gave you these nice dragons to defend you from the ice zombies, and you killed them all off because you all were petty and political. Like it's like Robin Williams. I gave you a real nice planet and you fucked it up. Like,
well put, Spicer. I feel like people in the audience are gonna be very proud of you in this moment, and they're gonna think that I trained you very well for that one.
Nope, I just have media literacy. That's all it is, baby. Like
weird. It's just being like aware of how like stories are put together, and if you just like pick up on that, it's like, hey, this is obvious.
It's so obvious, like, and like once again, like that's what's so crazy to me about the people who, because like it's so crazy about me, the people who are like, oh, this isn't political, like stop bringing politics into it. I'm like, but it is, like, but it's also
literally
not, like it's literally this like. It's literally just this angry little man shaking his fist at this guy who's like, you dumb idiots, the ice zombies are coming whether you like it or not. Like, and your magical wall is going to hold them back.
Okay. I do think we need to start wrapping up. So before we go, I do want to ask Spicer, what was your favorite death this week?
Oh shit, there actually were a couple this week.
Yeah, I mean they were all kind of at the same time, so picking one is kind of asinine.
But... I was about to say, which Dothraki writer was your favorite? I like Bob. I like when Bob died, because
Bob Dothraki, when he like lost his guts, I was like, oof. And then when Bill Dothraki, when he lost his head, I was like, oh no, Bill.
And then Jim got his woman.
Yeah, whoop-de-doo.
the dance of, as I love how George described it as the dance of death. Like, god damn it.
Oh, Georgie,
the Orientalism, it's so strong there. Like,
yeah. Okay. Well, just to prep y'all for next week, we will be doing the chapters are Eddard II Tyrion II and Catelyn III. So if you are reading along with us, feel free to read along. If not, we'll just yap. It's fun. So yeah, please find us on all our social media. Remember, I am at Rhani Allam, Rhani Alam. And where can the people find you, Spicer?
You can find me on Instagram at Spicer Car, or I think it's Spicer Car. And you can also just find me once again if you want to ever find out what I'm doing. Go to my website. It's just spicercarcomposer.com. I've got all my things that are coming up, so you can go and listen to music there.
Okay, sounds great. Hope y'all have a great week, and goodbye. Say bye, Spicer.
Bye, Spicer.
Okay, bye, y'all.